is Keys to the Shop, episode 420, Meaningful Structure for Your Cafe Roles. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio, and I'm your host for the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to be a listener, and thank you everyone for supporting the show over these years. If you would please subscribe to Keys to the Shop, you just need to hit the button that says subscribe, and that does wonders for the searchability of Keys to the Shop. It helps in the rankings and lets more people know about the great content. And most importantly, it lets you know about great content as it comes out, so you never miss any episode. So thank you so much for subscribing. And you know, one of the things that I'm really excited about here for Keys to the Shop, as you know, not only do I do this podcast, but I also do coaching and consulting for lots of coffee shop owners and managers all over the world. And in these conversations that I have with people through coaching, it makes you realize that it's so powerful to have somebody to talk to not just bounce ideas off of, but to work through solutions, to really get insights for your specific issues and opportunities. Just a life of running a business can be lonely. And that's why I'm excited to introduce Key Holder Coaching Groups. So Key Holder Coaching Groups is a new way for you to get support as a coffee shop owner amongst other coffee shop owners in a small group setting hosted by myself. And these groups are going to be meeting for 2 hours twice a month over 6 months. It's going to be intense. It's going to be encouraging and wonderful, providing clarity to all involved. And I'm excited to be launching this in September. And the applications for this are now open. So if you are interested in joining up with Key Holder Coaching Groups and want to be a part of a group that is dedicated to helping each other grow through insights, encouragement, accountability, then this is something that you need to look into. All you need to do is email chris@keystotheshop.com. I'll send you the link and more information about Key Holder Coaching Groups. Send me a DM on Instagram as well @KeysToTheShop. And you can also follow the link in the show notes, which will link you to the form to fill out the application to be considered for Key Holder Coaching Groups. We'll be making the selection for these groups starting in August, and then we'll be launching the first group in September. So again, if you want more information about Key Holder Coaching Groups, go ahead and email chris@keystotheshop.com, and I will see you in the group. Well, one of the most encouraging parts about working in coffee, as long as I have, is the ability to look back and see how far we've come. And one of the things that I see is the potential of coffee reaching new heights all the time. And the way that that happens is through shared information and innovation. Innovations like the ground control Cyclops brewer from Voga Coffee, taking the standard batch brew, which was kind of at a standstill in what we could expect from batch brew, and elevating it to unprecedented levels through its SCA award-winning technology that gives you control over a range and flavor depth that previously you just could not get from traditional batch brewers. But it not only does this, it makes tea, batch-sized lattes, batch cold brew. So on top of the quality upgrade, it introduces new levels of efficiency, profitability, and it looks amazing doing it too. It doesn't hurt. So you should really check them out over at groundcontrol.coffee to learn more about this wonderful piece of equipment. I think if you're looking for the next level for your coffee, your customers can really experience the best possible expression of your coffee, as well as efficiency and increased profitability and flow, then I think that you need to look into getting a ground control Cyclops brewer for your shop. Go ahead and check them out again over at groundcontrol.coffee. You know, well over half the beverages ordered in a cafe are plant-based beverages, and this is not going to slow down. People love options. They love tailoring drinks to their specific tastes. And when it comes to plant-based beverages, there is no excuse for us selling anything but the best to our customers. And out of all the options that you have out there, one of the best options that you can possibly choose is the Barista Series from Pacific, because it is a line of plant-based performance beverages designed for baristas, especially for the discerning tastes of professional baristas so that you know it performs on the bar to a high caliber. It's tested by some of the world's best baristas before it even reaches your shelves. So it stands up to the heat from steaming, produces amazing texture for latte art, and also keeps the taste and flavor balance focused on the coffee. So I really think your customers are going to love this. Check them out at pacificfoodservice.com. Contact them there and get samples and try it for yourself. I think if you're looking for the best plant-based beverages to serve your customers, it needs to be the Barista Series from Pacific. Okay, everyone. Well, today it is you and I'm excited to go through what I think is going to be really helpful for your cafe. And it has to do with how to develop meaningful roles for your coffee shop. Now, it has to be said at the outset that, I'm talking about meaningful roles. Well, it is the opposite of meaningless roles. Meaningless roles, I would define as roles that are invented simply to keep baristas around that you don't want to lose, but the cafe does not need. That's a meaningless role. It is something that eventually will get old because you're paying them more potentially to do this job, and they realize that the role is not necessary. And it just is hollow. It doesn't have much substance to it. Big advocate for the idea that you do not want to create a role for the business that the business does not need, because in the end, if the business doesn't need it, you cannot sustain it. The need the business has for it will be expressed through the tension you feel with your time, your money, and you should be listening to your business to figure out, hey, it looks like we need a manager. Just like you would listen to your business when you see your two baristas on shift getting backed up when you have these $300-$400 hours, and you say, it looks like we need a mid-shift third person on shift, right? That is a role born from listening to the business. And a lot of roles that we find in the cafe right now are meaningless in that they are put into position because we believe that's what businesses do, because we believe that's what a business does. And we start out a little too big for our britches right away. We look at our favorite coffee shop that we go to and we say, look, they have a trainer, they have a manager, they have an assistant manager, they have shift leads, they have baristas, they have an owner, they have a GM. I should have all of that because that's what successful coffee bars do. It's like saying, I'm going to get rich because I'm going to follow the morning ritual of, Elon Musk, forgetting the fact, if we want to talk about like Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers book, there's a whole constellation of reasons why somebody is in the position they're in. If you look at your favorite coffee shop and you look at their structure, you can take some inspiration from their story, but you can't really, without context, take their existence as it currently is and then assume too much and then think that it's just going to be this, if I do this, then that will happen. That's just not the way it works. For most people, you start out with meaningful roles in small quantities as the business requires them, and you acquire more roles and create more roles over time as the business grows. That's the recipe for success. I always point people to the Founder Friday episode with the Mud House over in St. Louis. We'll link to that in the show notes. It's a great one to talk about how they really basically just promoted from within, and they have made sure that their staff and their roles reflect the need of the business as it grows organically. I think that's a wonderful way to go about it. Okay, so I want to get that out of the way here and talk about that initially, because I do think that it is a problem in coffee shops. And it is maybe born from, too, the idea that, we are subconsciously trying to look more professional because we doubt ourselves so much. We basically have this imposter syndrome where in order to be more professional, we have to have more structure that looks professional. But I'm a big fan of the idea that you have to have a minimum viable system. So if you start out as a coffee shop, for instance, and you've got a manual that is 100 pages long, right from the get-go, you're doing too much. I guarantee it. There's no way that 100-page manual is going to be used. People will be overwhelmed, it defeats the purpose. It's just not absorbable nutrition. It'll just go, people will just pee it out, it's going to go right through them. It's a terrible analogy, but seriously though, you need to create systems and structure that is appropriate for the context you find yourself in and is extremely useful and understandable. So I want to dive into that last part a little bit here. Let's assume that you are putting a manager in place because the business needs a manager, because you as the owner are doing so much. You don't have time to grow the business. You don't have time to work on the business. You're always in the business, classic scenario. You need a manager because you find yourself being ineffective in the business and spending too much time on things that are menial tasks that you need to be freed up from in order to do the work that will inevitably help the people in the business have somewhere to go. If you want promotional opportunities for your baristas, you might need to grow to 2 or 3 shops. And that's maybe what you need to work on, but you can't do that unless you delegate and you create a team. So let's say that you have, and we'll use a manager as an example, a position of a manager that you are putting in place. Now we know the business needs it. And so we could just say, good, we're going to hire a manager. And we tell them up front, hey, we want you to just be responsible for the shop. Okay. That is your role. You're such a great barista. You know the place inside and out. You've basically trained everybody here. So we want to make you a manager. We're going to pay you some extra money here and just have at it. Okay. Yeah. And it sounds so good. It sounds so sincere and heartfelt, but inevitably some of you might be thinking this is going to not work out well. And the reason is there's no structure. We haven't really thought through exactly what they're going to do with their time and their energy and their resources. We haven't really thought through the whole process of what it means to be a manager in the space. And inevitably, this will set them up for failure because it really isn't very much of a directive to say, we want you to be responsible for the cafe. The question you always have to ask yourself is how? How does this work? When? When do I do these things? All the questions, who, what, when, where, why, how much, how little, how often. There is a huge conversation that needs to happen when you start this process of assigning a role. And I've always said this when it comes to managing managers, you're not necessarily getting rid of responsibility so much as you're freeing yourself up to be able to take on new responsibilities, one of which is leading your manager and managing your manager. And the very first thing you do with a manager to help lead them is to be clear about your expectations and to define the role in a way that is both, contextually relevant. In other words, it's not just downloaded from the internet and then applied and say, well, I downloaded a template for Cafe Manager and it's what we want to use for our cafe. It looks pretty good. And I'm always, thinking as soon as people start to have that tone in their voice, like, yeah, it's good. Yeah, I think it's pretty good. Something's wrong. Something is, compromising somewhere back in the gears, in the works. So listen to that little, squeaky, constricted, telltale sign right there. If you've got that inner voice that sounds like that when you're explaining how this template will probably work, or yeah, sure, it's good enough. No, you need to make this a study and do it the right way from the get-go, or else you're setting yourself and your manager up for failure. So what you need to do here is detail what the expectations of that role are, and imagine your manager and any other role in the cafe doing that thing, just as you would imagine a barista doing a closing shift. If you want to make a closing shift checklist that actually will get done, you will not simply make a wish list that is a mile long and get a bunch of disgruntled closers. You will make something that is mindful of the people that actually have to do the thing that you're putting out there in text. We hide behind sometimes these job descriptions, and people will destroy themselves trying to fulfill unreasonable expectations because the people who created them did not reason when they made them. They didn't think about what it would take. Not only that, they didn't think about what it takes from them. So if I say, I want you to be responsible for inventory and ordering, then I also have to be on the hook as the leader to evaluate your performance in inventory and ordering and be able to resource you with the right tools, the right access, the right standards and training, making sure you understand and are equipped with passwords and apps. And also you'll understand the PAR system and that kind of thing. What freedoms do you have to create different PAR systems, or don't you have those freedoms? These are all things that you could come up with as scenarios just in this one line on your job description about inventory, if you are thinking deeply about it. But what we do is we have all these throwaway lines. They will be responsible for creating an atmosphere of hospitality and caring amongst the staff that follows our values and guidelines. Oh, that's huge. What does that mean? In your meetings with them, how are you going to have a conversation about that? Now, you just said that they're responsible for that. And that's all well and good, but how are you going to help them achieve that? And how do you hope that they will, if you're hoping that they're going to create standards for you that you currently don't have? Did you even say that? Did you put that out there? You see, creating meaningful roles in the cafe is about not only making sure that the role is needed, but that you are giving people the needed resources and information and time and training to do this well, and that you've counted the cost on your end because you're still the agent of clarity, the agent of resourcing. You're still the chief learning officer and all these other monikers that we're giving you as we continue to make podcasts. I hope this is making sense because this is a scourge, really, upon the face of cafes all over the place. It is a joke. When you look at LinkedIn profiles and you look at people's history, and let's say that you know somebody that you used to work with, and there was a week where they had to take over for the manager where they had to count milk 2 or 3 times that week, and they had to put in the order. On LinkedIn, they're going to put that they were responsible for multi-unit cafe inventory management or some kind of flowery language. They ordered milk 3 times one week, and then all of a sudden, that's the meaning that they need to make. They know that that's just fluff, right? And so much of our cafe's roles and responsibilities are fluff. A, because the role is not justified by the business. B, because we haven't really put in a lot of work to determine what this role is going to look like for the person occupying it. So we leave it to them to fill in the gap of what the meaning is for that. And that's automatically setting them up to discount their contributions. So even if you tell them, great job, even if you're really excited about their work, they know that they can't keep that up. They're not excited about it because they barely got by. I have lived this life. I'll tell you, I would much rather, in jobs past, I would have rather have had more structure than less. I am grateful for autonomy, but autonomy does not mean hands off. I want my autonomy to be measured. I want the success of my work in autonomy to be measured against a standard of values and deliverables and expectations that is clearly communicated. Okay. And that's how autonomy can actually be useful in a role. But it still requires responsibility from you to set up a standard by which those decisions can be judged as effective or ineffective. So the end result of not doing these things and setting up managers for success with meaningful roles justified by the business with details and expectations that have been well thought through and resourced is you end up with a bunch of managers who basically are just babysitters. They're there in name only. They know it. They're afraid of their authority because they don't view their authority as a benefit to anybody because even they don't understand what they're supposed to be doing. And so they basically just regress. And I don't mean this as a derogatory thing, but they try to enter back into being a barista as much as they possibly can and will only take on the managerial hat when they have to do things like the basic and safe ordering and, maybe not so safe scheduling and that kind of thing. Without that structure of the role, you will not have people leaning into their role. They will not feel safe in that position. It will feel dangerous. Like I'm out here with no net. Leadership abandonment syndrome that we've talked about before. It's the same thing. Leaders in the cafe have to be treated with respect. Just think about this. If you have a hard time with that statement that they have to be treated with respect, think about the fact that in order to respect yourself and your business, you have to respect that role and the person who occupies that role. That's what will allow your business to thrive. You can't think of it. You might have all sorts of things against an individual with quirks and idiosyncrasies that you don't like, who's in a training role or a management role, but it's not about them. It's about the role itself. And even if they're not as good as you would like them to be, and you eventually move on from them, that person is still showing you something about that role that you can refine and benefit the next person. They're still giving you useful information. If you have the mindset that part of your job is to refine roles, to evolve these positions into better versions of themselves, so the people who occupy them have a better chance at success progressively as the business grows. So where do you go from here? You may have job descriptions. I hope you do. I think that's a great place to start, is to look through your current structure, even if you don't have something written down. I know that you have in your mind and have communicated verbally certain things. Those are just in this mind space, the mind cloud of your leadership. Put it down on paper. What does it look like thus far? Anytime I'm working with somebody on detailing how do you onboard and train people right now? How do you go through hiring? We can have a detailed conversation about, okay, next is what step and what step and what step. Now, they might have a tight process, but they have a go-to methodology that they've adopted organically. That's a great first step. Now, you need to be ruthless about judging the effectiveness of this particular role and whether or not it makes sense, what you're expecting people to do. Do not go into this with the idea that people should know how to do this, and therefore I get to be off the hook for being detailed. Again, it is up to us to provide excruciatingly detailed how-tos and what and when, all of the context and specifics that will help this person answer questions that they may have immediately upon reading or eventually upon doing, as much as we can. We're not going to even get it then, because they're going to do the work and they're going to discover something that we can improve on. That's why these are living documents, okay? But as you go through your job descriptions, you can start with baristas, you can start with managers and trainers. Look at what they're responsible for and think about each one of the deliverables and expectations and how clear you've really been about what it takes to do that job. Each thing that you require somebody to do should have an attached standard operating procedure. Not a verbally communicated standard that you give them, but an actual document that will help them as a tool to back up what you communicate. One of my clients right now is going to be putting somebody into a barista lead position, eventual manager position. They're growing into management. And one of the things we've been talking about is the work that they need to do leading up to putting this person in a position, because they feel they don't want to put them in there and then have all of these sort of like unfinished SOPs, because then that person's going to feel like, well, I don't really have the tools to do my job. And that is a great conversation that we're having. And when they do put this person in that position, that is going to be a meaningful role. We've considered what they do, how they do it, what tools are available, what it would look like when they do the work, and what the track is for that person. It's a long-term investment into coaching them. It's not just a set and forget type of scenario. So you could go through this exercise and say, well, we've got a very detailed job description with tons of attached SOPs. And we've got that whole constellation of things that you were talking about, Chris. But if you think that that's going to be a surrogate for your involvement as a coach to help this person succeed through executing those things, you're dead wrong. This is just a tool to be used in the relationship that is a forever thing in a coffee bar. You don't get rid of that. That is not what delegation is about. That's what abdication is about. And it doesn't work. At least it doesn't work in a sense that it doesn't produce the kind of thing that I think you might want to be going for, which is a rich culture of engaged professionals who are leaning into higher levels of work and service to each other and to your customers. If that's the kind of thing you want, and that's going to be always what you do. And this process of making meaningful roles and resourcing people with detailed explanations and tools to do the work, and having thought through these roles and not just invented them out of thin air for no reason, only to be found that there's no substance to them. And what this means is that if you look at the track of somebody in your coffee shop, you're not going to have to rely on assessing people's performance based on extra work that they do. Because the role is so robust and well thought out, there'll be plenty of opportunity within the scope of their role for you to see them shine and be responsible. I think we look for people doing extra work because we haven't detailed the work well enough. We look for people going above and beyond because we haven't even really thought through the expectations that we have of people. We rely on their creativity and resourcefulness to sort of let us off the hook for a lack of resourcing them. So this is something that I hope you embrace, looking at your roles and investing into them as the business needs them, with very great detail and forethought about how you will be involved in the process, what your expectations are. Are they realistic? Are they relevant? When will they happen? This has to be, like I said, well thought out. And as I said, we treat people with respect. You have to be willing to fairly compensate people for these roles, which may yet be another reason why you want to enter into this more slowly. Because if you just put people in all of these roles but don't pay them very much, you're just going to be going through people all the time who are leads and supervisors and assistants and managers, and they realize that this is just peanuts. They don't get paid very much because the role's not defined, and you don't see the meaning of it because you haven't gone through the process in defining its meaning. And it may not have been a role that you needed anyway, but you just wanted to have it to maybe satisfy your baristas, to say like, okay, well, don't go. Maybe I'll give you a little bit of extra money and you can be a shift supervisor. I'd rather have you have a team of baristas with 1 or 2 meaningful roles than a team of baristas with 5 or 6 meaningless ones that you hope at a kind of Hail Mary thing to keep them there. Paying people professional wages for professional work is kind of insinuating that you've done the work to develop a professional role. So I hope that this has been instructive and inspiring to you to really hit the books with your current structures. I'm going to link to some episodes about job descriptions, about SOPs, sort of continue this conversation. And I hope you will eliminate some roles, potentially, that are not needed in the cafe. I hope that you will stop yourself from creating roles that you are on the path to create that you know you can't justify. And I hope that you will take the roles that are justified, that you are creating, and really take this as inspiration to avoid the mistake of not developing them well. Count the cost, make it detailed, make it make sense, and treat it professionally and the people who do it professionally. Then that role is going to really serve you and the company very well for a long time. So again, hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback about today's episode, feel free to email me, chris@keystotheshop.com. I mentioned a couple of times here, there's coaching and consulting that I've done where we do talk about these things quite often, especially when I'm assessing people's current operations. If that's something that's interesting to you, go ahead and email me, chris@keystotheshop.com. Again, we'll set up a free discovery call. And don't forget, the Keyholder Coaching Group application is open. This small group dedicated to accountability and uplifting coffee shop owners is going to be starting in September. So you can reach out to me to that email to inquire about that as well. I get to see a lot of people throughout the year, every year, 4 times a year at Coffee Fest. Coffee Fest has been going on for 30 years, and it never disappoints in terms of delivering great value and in-depth resources and content for coffee retailers that want to succeed, who want to take all of the facets of what it means to run a great coffee shop and dive in deeply. That is where you can go every year, 4 times a year. If you go to coffeefest.com, you'll learn about upcoming shows. The next 2 shows, last ones of 2023, are in Anaheim, California, and then in Orlando, Florida. Use the code KEYS, KEYS, and you'll get 50% off your general admission when you sign yourself and your team up at coffeefest.com. I will be speaking at both these shows. I always do lecturing and training. I've got a little booth. I do some judging for latte art. Just a good time. I really hope to see you there because it really is an event like no other. Check them out today over at coffeefest.com. Okay, well, it is the end of our show today. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. And again, I hope that as we talked about meaningful roles in the cafe, it inspired you to take at least a couple of really meaningful actions this week. Put it on your schedule. Make sure that it's a real process, substantial process, and start the ball rolling in the right direction. It would be lovely. So that would just warm my heart to know that something we talked about on the shop has made its way into your cafe, has helped you run a great business and fulfill your dream in coffee. So thanks again, everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to the show. Go ahead and follow Keys to the Shop on Instagram at Keys to the Shop. Reach out to me if you'd like to chat at Keys to the Shop. You can just DM me or email Chris at keystotheshop.com. Share these episodes far and wide. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.